In the shadowed alleys of medieval Europe, where cobblestones gleamed wet under the drizzle and the air was thick with smoke from countless hearths, the concept of theft was not a mere breach of property. It was a crime against the very structure of society. Towns were fortified not only to defend against foreign invaders, but to protect their fragile economic and social orders, and within these towns, justice was swift, brutal, and unflinchingly public. Among the instruments of law, none inspired as much terror as the device designed to crush a thief's hands, a merciless contraption that could shatter every bone, reducing skill and sinew to pulp, leaving behind a cautionary tale etched in flesh and memory. This device was more than punishment. It was a spectacle, a ritual, a symbol of the social contract enforced through fear, and a reflection of a society in which survival, hierarchy, and obedience dominated every facet of life. To understand why such a horrific device existed, one must immerse oneself in the mindset of the Middle Ages, a period stretching from roughly the 5th to the 15th century, a time when Europe was defined by scarcity, hierarchy, superstition, and the omnipresent threat of violence. The economy was fragile, trade was localized and precious, and a single act of theft could disrupt livelihoods, ruin families, or destabilize towns. Laws were not abstract ideals, they were instruments of survival backed by the threat of overwhelming force. In such a context, theft, even a petty crime like stealing bread or coins, was an offense not only against the victim, but against the social order itself, and the response had to be visible, dramatic, and unforgettable. The hand-crushing device, sometimes referred to in chronicles as the hand guillotine or finger breaker, emerged during the late 12th and early 13th centuries, primarily in urban centers of Germany, France, and parts of England. Merchants and guilds, whose livelihoods depended on the sanctity of property, petitioned local authorities for tools of punishment that were as terrifying as they were effective. To disable a thief's hands was to neutralize both threat and skill, ensuring that the criminal could not repeat his transgressions. But authorities went further. The punishment was designed to be public, to instill fear not only in the guilty party, but in every potential offender who might hear of it. Historical legal texts provide chilling testimony to this practice. The German Schwabenspiegel, a 13th century codex, outlines corporal punishment for repeated theft, specifically mentioning the crushing of hands as a legal penalty. French guild records describe merchants empowering city authorities to exact harsh penalties on thieves, often targeting their hands to protect trade interests. Even in England, while hanging and branding were more common, some towns utilized devices that crushed or broke fingers, particularly in regions where trade and commerce made petty theft an existential threat. These punishments were rarely for first-time offenders. Medieval law often operated on a system of escalating penalties, starting with warnings, then corporal punishment, and finally, for persistent thieves, the full application of mechanical justice. The design of the hand-crushing device was both ingenious and horrifying. Constructed of iron and wood, it was designed to maximize damage while minimizing effort by the executioner. Some versions featured a screw mechanism that allowed pressure to be applied gradually, intensifying pain over minutes, while others were lever-operated, delivering near instantaneous destruction. The victim's hands were placed in a frame, each finger secured individually, with wrist straps ensuring proper alignment. When activated, the device shattered phalanges, metacarpals, and tendons, leaving a permanent warning on the criminal's body. In some accounts, the executioner could control the speed of crushing, prolonging agony for effect, both punishing the offender and impressing upon onlookers the severity of justice. The psychological impact of the device extended beyond the immediate victim. Public punishment was a communal spectacle designed to educate through fear. Imagine a medieval market square, merchants shouting prices, the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread mingling with the stench of waste, children playing and dodging carts, all suddenly falling silent as guards drag a thief forward. The crowd presses closer, curiosity and dread mingling, while the iron and wood device gleams ominously in the sunlight, straps dangling, gears waiting. The thief, pale and trembling, is secured within the frame, and as the first lever is turned, a collective gasp rises from the onlookers. Bones snap, tendons tear. The sound, a sickening mix of crack and splinter, echoes in the square, and the lesson is clear. Crime carries a price, and it is paid in pain and blood. Chroniclers of the era recorded these punishments with grim fascination. One 14th century German account describes a man caught repeatedly stealing from a guild. His hands were placed in the device, each bone shattered before the gathered townsfolk. Witnesses were instructed to observe, to remember, and to fear. Similar accounts from France and England reveal the same practice. Hand punishment was both corrective and performative, teaching the community through terror. The use of such devices reflects the broader societal philosophy. Cruelty was not gratuitous. It was purposeful, a tool to enforce compliance, maintain hierarchy, and protect vital economic systems. Beyond punishment, the hand-crushing device also embodies the medieval intertwining of law, spectacle, and morality. It represents a society in which survival demanded absolute adherence to rules, in which authority was unyielding, and in which the human body itself could be weaponized to maintain order. For the victim, the device was a physical and psychological nightmare, leaving permanent disability and trauma. For the witnesses, it was a visceral lesson in obedience and fear. And for historians, it remains a sobering testament to the extremes of medieval justice. The hand-crushing device, terrifying in both concept and execution, was more than a mechanical instrument. It was a cultural artifact, reflecting the values, fears, and social imperatives of medieval Europe. Its legacy persists in the collective imagination, a chilling reminder of a time when justice was enforced through pain. Fear was a deliberate tool of governance, and the line between order and cruelty was indistinct, blurred by the necessity of survival and the desire to maintain societal cohesion. As we prepare to examine the mechanics and operational use of this device, in the next section, it is vital to understand that what might seem excessively cruel to modern sensibilities was, in the context of the Middle Ages, considered necessary, pragmatic, and deeply instructive, a demonstration of power designed to ensure compliance, deter crime, and safeguard the very fabric of society. The story of the hand-crushing device, of the market silenced by its operation, the cries of thieves echoing through cobblestone alleys, and the wide-eyed children who would never forget the lessons of fear and authority, is a story that bridges time, revealing the extremes of human ingenuity, the depths of cruelty, and the enduring human fascination with punishment as both deterrent and spectacle. The hand-crushing device, a marvel of cruel ingenuity, was more than a simple tool. It was a meticulously designed instrument intended to exact maximum physical devastation while simultaneously amplifying psychological terror, both for the criminal and for the community that bore witness. Constructed primarily from iron, reinforced with sturdy hardwood frames, and often featuring intricate mechanical systems such as screws, levers, and ratchets, the device functioned as a grim testament to the medieval mastery of engineering in service of punishment. Its design varied across regions and centuries, reflecting both local craftsmanship and evolving philosophies of justice. In some German towns, it resembled a large vise with individual slots for each finger, allowing the executioner to crush phalanges sequentially, prolonging the agony and creating a spectacle of suffering. In France, guild-regulated devices sometimes combined clamps and levers, ensuring that the victim's wrists were immobilized, fingers aligned precisely, and pressure applied with mechanical efficiency that left no room for error or mercy. The process of punishment was ritualistic, almost ceremonial, often preceded by public accusation, presentation before the town council, and a parade through streets lined with spectators who were instructed by fear and authority to observe and internalize the consequences of crime. Imagine a thief, bound with ropes, dragged into the square, his face pale and eyes wide with terror, as merchants, children, and town officials gather in tense silence. The executioner, a figure often chosen for both skill and impartiality, secures the victim's wrists in iron cuffs attached to the device, threads each finger into a corresponding slot, and methodically tightens the screws or engages the lever system. In versions with ratchet mechanisms, the operator could gradually increase pressure, first causing intense discomfort, then snapping small bones, followed by the complete disintegration of metacarpals and the severing of tendons, each crack audible to the crowd, each scream a reinforcement of the lesson being imparted. The psychological horror of the device was as meticulously designed as its physical mechanisms. For the victim, the anticipation was nearly as excruciating as the act itself. The knowledge that the device could crush every bone in the hand, combined with the awareness of countless eyes watching, amplified fear to near unbearable levels. Medieval chroniclers recount that some thieves fainted or screamed uncontrollably before the lever was even fully engaged, their terror transmitted to the spectators, whose reactions, gasps, recoiling, whispered warnings, further heightened the intensity of the ritual. This deliberate orchestration of fear served multiple purposes. It punished the offender, reinforced social hierarchies, and acted as a deterrent for others who might contemplate similar crimes. In historical records, such punishments were often reserved for repeat offenders or those caught in high-stakes thefts, such as robbing merchants, guilds, or wealthy households. In one documented case from 14th century Nuremberg, a man who had repeatedly stolen from the local cloth merchants was sentenced to the hand-crushing device. Chroniclers describe the square filled with townspeople, the thief's cries echoing off the timbered houses, and the eventual immobilization of his hands, which rendered him unable to work or steal again. The spectacle served its purpose. Reports indicate that subsequent thefts in that district dramatically decreased for months after the punishment. Variations of the device also illustrate the regional differences in medieval justice. In some German towns, the device included rotating gears that allowed the executioner to crush the fingers one by one, prolonging pain while maintaining the structural integrity of the hand for maximum psychological effect. French guild devices sometimes integrated hammers or weighted levers, striking the hand with calibrated force to break bones while leaving the wrist intact, ensuring the victim remained restrained and visible for the full duration of the punishment. England, while less documented in the widespread use of such devices, also had local adaptations, particularly in market towns, where finger-breaking or hand-crushing instruments were employed as extreme deterrents. The execution of these punishments was highly ritualized, blending mechanical efficiency with performative terror. Victims were often paraded to the square, publicly accused, and required to stand before the device as the assembly of witnesses grew larger. Merchants, townsfolk, and visiting travelers would observe, sometimes with children pointing and whispering, learning both the mechanics of justice and the consequences of disobedience. For the criminal, every moment was agony. The anticipation of the screws tightening, the gradual shattering of bones, the excruciating pressure that splintered metacarpals, severed ligaments, and destroyed tendons. The cries, the visual horror, and the physical trauma combined to create a punishment that was inescapable not only physically, but psychologically, imprinting a permanent lesson into the mind of the offender and all who watched. The aftermath of the punishment was equally telling. Victims who survived the device were often permanently disabled, their hands deformed and functionally useless, ensuring that they could never return to a life of crime. Medieval societies accepted, even expected, such permanent mutilation as both retribution and prevention, prioritizing communal safety over individual rehabilitation. Chroniclers often recorded these outcomes with a mix of clinical observation and moral commentary, noting not only the efficacy of the device, but also the fear it instilled in the broader population. In some towns, the device remained on public display even when not in use, a constant visual reminder of authority and consequence, much like the gallows or pillories that dominated other civic spaces. Historical records also suggest that the implementation of such devices was subject to strict regulation. City councils, guild leaders, or local magistrates often oversaw the process, ensuring the punishment adhered to prescribed legal standards and that the spectacle served its intended purpose without devolving into chaotic cruelty. While the physical mechanics of the hand-crushing device were terrifying in themselves, it is the combination of engineering, ritual, and social psychology that underscores its place in medieval justice. The device transformed punishment into an immersive, multi-sensory lesson. The sights of the victim's hands in the iron frame, the audible cracking of bones, the cries of pain, the reactions of the crowd, and the anticipation leading up to each incremental tightening, all contributed to an educational yet horrifying experience designed to enforce order and compliance. Moreover, the device reflected broader cultural attitudes toward justice and authority. Medieval society valued public demonstration, visible enforcement, and the cultivation of fear as a tool of governance. The hand-crushing device exemplified these values, embodying a principle that would resonate across centuries: deterrence through visible, extreme, and inescapable punishment. Beyond the mechanics and ritual, the device also raises questions about human resilience and psychological endurance. Historical accounts describe victims who, despite severe pain, remained conscious, their terror magnified by the understanding that every movement could worsen their injuries. That escape was impossible, and that the gaze of the community bore down upon them. These narratives highlight not only the cruelty of the device, but also the medieval recognition of psychological suffering as a component of justice, a calculated infliction of fear to complement physical punishment. In essence, the hand-crushing device was as much a tool of the mind as it was of the body. It forced the criminal to confront pain, helplessness, and social censure simultaneously, transforming the act of justice into a comprehensive, immersive experience designed to protect society, deter future crimes, and reinforce hierarchical authority. The legacy of the device, though horrifying, also illuminates the ingenuity of medieval engineering, the interplay of psychology and law, and the societal willingness to employ extreme measures for communal protection. In examining the detailed mechanics, the step-by-step process of execution, the variations across regions, and the psychological strategies embedded in its use, we gain not only a historical understanding of medieval justice, but also insight into the values, fears, and human behaviors that shaped an era. The hand-crushing device, terrifying in conception, horrifying in execution, and enduring in historical memory, stands as a stark symbol of a society in which punishment was absolute. Fear was a deliberate instrument, and the human body could be transformed into a lesson for all to witness, a lesson that resonated far beyond the market square, echoing through history as both warning and narrative, cruelty and pedagogy, law and spectacle, forever etching the story of medieval justice into the collective consciousness. As the echoes of splintering bones faded from the crowded town squares of medieval Europe, the hand-crushing device left behind more than just physical devastation. It etched into the collective memory of towns and cities a lasting legacy of fear, authority, and societal order. Its impact extended far beyond the immediate victims, shaping the way communities viewed crime, punishment, and the power of law for generations. Chroniclers of the time frequently documented not only the mechanics of the device, but also its broader social influence, emphasizing that such brutal punishments were integral to maintaining the delicate balance between survival and chaos, between obedience and rebellion. Among the most notable historical cases was that of Hans Müller, a 14th-century German thief caught repeatedly plundering a merchant guild's warehouses in Nuremberg. According to records, Müller had initially been fined and publicly flogged, yet he persisted in his thefts. The town council, recognizing both his skill and his repeated defiance, decreed that he would be subjected to the hand-crushing device. On the day of punishment, the square was packed with townspeople, merchants, and children, all eager and fearful to witness the consequences of defying authority. The executioner carefully positioned Müller's hands within the iron frame, threading each finger into the device's slots and tightening the screws gradually, amplifying both physical agony and psychological terror. Witnesses described the scene in painstaking detail. The audible cracking of bones, Müller's screams echoing through the square, and the wide-eyed terror of onlookers as they absorbed the lesson of absolute compliance. The punishment was not merely retributive, it served as a powerful deterrent, dramatically reducing theft in the region for years. In France, similar cases illustrate the device's integration into guild regulation and civic law. In Paris, records from the 15th century recount the punishment of a young man caught stealing from the fabric merchants of the city. The guild required that offenders' hands be crushed publicly to ensure that their skill could not threaten commerce again. In this instance, the execution was meticulously recorded by a town scribe, noting every detail from the preparation of the device to the reactions of the crowd, demonstrating that punishment had become a carefully choreographed blend of law enforcement, social spectacle, and moral instruction. England, though less prolific in its use of hand-crushing devices compared to continental Europe, also provides accounts of similar punishments in market towns, where theft posed a significant threat to local trade. These historical cases reveal the device's broader purpose. It was not solely about punishing an individual, but about reinforcing the societal structure, protecting commerce, and embedding fear as a mechanism of governance. Beyond individual cases, the legacy of the hand-crushing device is evident in the evolution of medieval and early modern justice systems. The device symbolizes a period in which punishment was intensely physical, public, and intertwined with morality, authority, and communal survival. Over time, as legal systems evolved and societies developed more complex notions of justice, rehabilitation, and human rights, the use of such devices diminished, giving way to penalties that emphasized deterrence through incarceration, fines, or less visibly destructive means. However, the psychological principle underlying the hand-crushing device, using fear, spectacle, and social pressure to enforce compliance, remains a persistent theme in human history, echoing in forms as varied as public executions, branding, or even modern media portrayals of crime and punishment. The philosophical and ethical implications of the device are profound. It raises enduring questions about the balance between justice and cruelty, the use of fear as a tool for social control, and the moral boundaries society set when enforcing laws. The medieval hand-crushing device exemplifies the extremes to which human societies will go to maintain order and ensure obedience, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior, authority, and the psychology of fear. Furthermore, the device's notoriety has permeated cultural memory, influencing literature, art, and modern discussions about punishment. It stands as a stark symbol of a time when law was inseparable from physical coercion, when authority demanded absolute obedience, and when the human body could be weaponized to maintain societal structure. For historians and storytellers alike, the hand-crushing device offers rich insight into medieval life, the fears, values, and practices that defined an era. Its story is not merely about cruelty, it is about a society grappling with crime, scarcity, and the challenge of preserving order, revealing the ingenuity, psychology, and pragmatism that underpinned medieval justice. As we reflect upon its legacy, we see a continuum, from the public squares of Nuremberg and Paris, where bones were shattered and lessons taught, to the evolution of legal systems that gradually prioritized proportionate punishment. The hand-crushing device represents a critical junction in the history of justice, a moment when fear, spectacle, and mechanical precision intersected to enforce societal norms. In a broader sense, the tale of the hand-crushing device challenges modern audiences to consider how societies measure justice, the ethical limits of punishment, and the role of fear in governance. It reminds us that history is not only a record of events, but also a narrative of human choices reflecting the lengths to which communities will go to protect order and the creative, often horrifying methods they employ to do so. By understanding the device's operational details, the documented cases of its use, and the psychological and social strategies embedded in its deployment, we gain insight into a medieval worldview in which authority was absolute, obedience was non-negotiable, and fear was a deliberately cultivated instrument of law. Ultimately, the story of the hand-crushing device is a testament to the resilience and vulnerability of the human body, the ingenuity of human engineering applied to punishment, and the complex interplay of law, morality, and psychology in shaping historical societies. Its legacy endures as a cautionary tale, a historical lesson, and a stark illustration of the extremes of medieval justice, reminding us that while societies evolve, the fundamental challenges of crime, punishment, and authority remain ever present, demanding reflection, understanding, and sometimes uneasy acknowledgement of the dark ingenuity that once defined human justice.